The name derived from my background as an EMT. I was an EMT for years. And
Mhm.
my whole life, I spent my life helping people. I was a director for a food pantry. And music was always something that got me by. It was always my remedy. And the people that I work with in creating my music, they're also my remedy. They're my cure to release what I wanted to do. So by being called Ryan and the Remedy, they're the ones that save me in whatever I want to do. The lyrics are what release whatever emotion that I'm going through. So it's that whole, every cycle of that is a remedy.
Welcome to our latest edition of Adeptus On-Air, and today we have a very cool guest in Ryan Galway, who is a musician and an entrepreneur, and also a tour manager. So a lot of hats that you wear in the entertainment business. So Ryan, thanks, thanks for joining the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I'm excited to be here. It's
Okay,
been
so
a
I
long journey.
recently heard your new single, and it was terrific, called Valentine. Great song, great pacing. What was your inspiration behind the song?
Ironically, I wrote that song a year ago on Valentine's Day. And it was about wanting to, for it was a trifold thing. It was for people that were wishing for a Valentine, and for me wanting to be with somebody else than the person I was currently with on Valentine's Day. It was like, this is not where I want to be. This is, it's just like I'm still wishing for that Valentine. It just wasn't an authentic day for me. So a lot stirred up in my head, and I was like, I just started writing. And I often write my lyrics first for any song, and I don't sit and write every day. I write when it comes to me or when I'm inspired by something. And that's what happened. Valentine was a story about wishing for that Valentine, wanting to have that true romance of I'm a hopeless romantic, so wanting that love story that everybody else has.
Awesome, awesome. You mentioned something that you usually write the lyrics before, you hear the music. Is that me not being from a musician background? Is that the usual? Is that unusual? Or
Well, like my clients, for example, Janet Gardner and her husband Justin James, they write their music first before they write their lyrics. So there are people that will sit there and they'll strum and they'll play, and then once they find this rhythm that they like, then they'll try to place the words in with that. And that's something I've wanted to do, but I've never done. I've always been a storyteller first.
yeah, 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 whatever process I think works best for you, especially as an artist. Your band, Ryan and the Remedy. How did you come up with that name, and what would you say your style is as a band?
The name derived from my background as an EMT. I was an EMT for years. And
Mhm.
my whole life, I spent my life helping people. I was a director for a food pantry. And music was always something that got me by. It was always my remedy. And the people that I work with in creating my music, they're also my remedy. They're my cure to release what I wanted to do. So by being called Ryan and the Remedy, they're the ones that save me in whatever I want to do. The lyrics are what release whatever emotion that I'm going through. So it's that whole, every cycle of that is a remedy. And then hopefully for everybody else, people will be able to relate to those songs and make them their remedy, their cure. And that's kind of where it went. And when designing the logo, that was a big thing that I wanted to be a part of my logo was that medical symbol because it represents the background that I come from. I've been fortunate enough to save some lives as an EMT and through CPR and things like that. So it's been a very cathartic journey from the beginning, and music was always m- my cloth. It was always a part of me, everything I wanted to do. So after writing for all these years, it's time to release and share. And I got 26 songs in the book ready to go.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. I didn't know you had a background as an EMT, and that Wow, that's an amazing story with that. Your album, speaking of songs that you have ready to go, your upcoming album is called Heart Matters. Heart Matters, if I'm correct with that.
Yep.
So it sounds like love and relationships are something very much at the forefront.
It's a concept
Are these
album.
topics that are natural for you to write? Are these topics that are easy for you to write musically?
Some of them are, some of them aren't. Some of them are about other people. Heart matter is that story topic of all matters of the heart: love, rejection, learning to let go. So, and that's a title on that's a song on the album is called "Learning to Let Go," and it so what I think I'm going to be doing is Heart Matter Part 1 is going to come out. And then this summer I'm going to work on Christmas songs for this upcoming Christmas. And then I'm going to circle back to finishing up the album. So I think I'm going to do a Heart Matter Part 1 and a Heart Matter Part 2. So the first part is the starting of a love journey, essentially. The whole album is a concept album. It's all matters of the heart. I have a song on there that's a blues driven song called Rejected. So it takes you on this cycle, and it's a cycle that I think everybody will relate to when it comes to love and rejection and falling in love. And so that's why I decided to call the album Heart Matter. And ironically, the last song I wrote for the album was called Heart Matter because I already had the album title and I needed one more song to round out like 10 songs. And I was just like, I really want to write a title track to the album. So I thought about it for 3 days of like, what is this going to be? What is it going to look like? And one day I was actually sitting in my room and it just came to me and I just started. I type a lot of my songs on my phone, so I just started typing away and you know, it was finished within like the day. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I like the title. It looks like it came about right at the end, but just right on time.
There's
Just
a song on there called Romeo and Juliet I wrote in like 2008. It's an older song. So a lot of them aren't just new, but some of them like Valentine writing it inspired me to want to release this whole concept. I wrote that song and I had a couple other love songs that I had kind of written within the past year, 2 years that meant a lot to me. And it was something I wanted to say. So for doing that, I wrote Valentine. I'm like, I got Be All I Know, which is going to be a great song. And which is going to be my next single called Be All I Know. And that is about when you first meet somebody and you're above the clouds, you're over the moon, and they're the only person you want to know in your life. And that's what that song was about. And it's started recording it, and it's the happiest love song I ever wrote. It's just
it's
happy and
amazing. And it's
joy and everything. Yeah, it's a fun song.
it's
120 beats per minute, so it's upbeat. It's so it's gonna be good.
nice. Looking forward to hearing that. It's interesting on this topic because people were writing about love songs in 1925 and people were
Hmm.
writing about love songs in 2025. 100 years later, and it doesn't really matter the genre. There's pop love songs, there's rock love songs, there's ballad love songs, there's jazz, R&B love songs. Why do you think this particular topic of love and relationships has stood the test of time within music?
It's relatable. It's relatable. Everybody has heartache and they fall in love or they want to be in love and in social media today, it's a lonely existence because you see what everybody else you want what everybody else has or pretend to have. Social media isn't exactly a truth telling story of what people are doing in their lives, but you see that and it's like, God, I want that. There's a song, I never put it on an album or anything. It's called Enough. I have it on my YouTube channel. And that's a song about a friend of mine who never thought she would never fall in love, never meet somebody. So the night she got engaged, I sat in my mother's kitchen and penned out that song Enough and ended up recording it as a duet. And it was just one of those things where you see and it's called Enough is because you never feel like you can ever be enough in a love relationship, and she never thought she was going to find it. And that was the story behind it. It was just, it was a beautiful love story that she never thought she'd, and they're still together to this day, which says a lot.
Interesting, interesting. And how do you add the beat to the lyrics? Um, how do you add the rhythm? How do you know if it's a like as you're writing the lyrics? How do you add the music, knowing it's a faster song, a slower song,
As I'm
certain
writing it,
pace?
yeah, as I'm writing it, I kind of have a melody in my head of how I want it to go. So like as I'm writing it, I'm kind of singing it in my head, and then I work from there. I remember when I started working on lines to define, I was in the F chord, just dun 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 dun, dun. And I had that rhythm in my head, and I knew that was the direction I wanted to go in. With Valentine, it was very interesting because it's like these cold nights and nothing's feeling right. So it was like these break and pauses that were, in there. And then I just picked up the guitar and went from there after the song was written. Um, with Be All I Know, I'm changing it a little bit from what I originally had planned in recording. So last weekend I was in the studio and my producer and he's like, I'm going to add a drum beat just for timing purposes and let's see how that goes. And I'm playing to this beat. And I'm like, that's it. We're keeping this. I says, this is now the happiest love song I've ever written. It's happy. It's upbeat. It has a great flow. And I said, that's where I want to go with the song. So sometimes it changes once you get in the studio and you start. And it's funny enough, I ended up writing the bridge for that song in the studio because I had forgotten all about like writing a structural song, verse, chorus, and I forgot about a bridge and out the bridge right there, and that's when the bridge was written for that song is when we were recording it. So sometimes things change.
Yeah, Ryan, who are some of your musical inspirations that you listen to that
Oh, I got
kind
some
of was
good ones.
influential to your music?
What got me into songwriting was Bon Jovi. I had heard an interview that he said if you want to be a rock star, you got to write your own songs. And that stuck with I still have songs in my binder somewhere from when I was 10 years old. And back then I was writing about love songs because it was just something that came naturally. And I don't even think I knew what love was at the age of 10, but it was just one of those things that you just write. And God, Billy Joel is another inspiration. He's such a great songwriter. Scenes from an Italian restaurant. The guy's talking about three songs in one and is telling a story. Just fascinating. Keith Urban, I love a lot of stuff he does. So there's a lot of so the bridge part in um Valentine, there's a part where it goes, I know I got you, I know you got me, should this be a reality? I used a compression effect on the voice, and I got that idea from Nickelback. Nickelback
Mhm.
used this compression microphone in a couple of their songs that alters kind of the sound of your voice a little bit. And I was like, that would be a really, really cool idea. So we did that. There's a song that's going to come out on a future album called Hey Girl, and I use a talk box. And that idea came from, of course, Bon Jovi with Living on a Prayer, It's My Life, and
Yeah.
Aerosmith, Sweet Emotion. So using a talk box was just a fun kind of. I'm not a big techie gear guy, but that was one I'm like, I want to try this, you know? Um, and I did, and it came out pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree. I enjoyed the song with that. And Ryan, not only are you a musician, but you're also an entrepreneur. So tell us about Sleepless Life. I see that in the background there.
Yeah,
Tell us about
this
your
is my
entrepreneurial venture.
my baby. I'm the jack of all trades, master of none. That's what I tell everybody. But back in COVID, was just out of work, out of place, and just kind of lost in the world. And I had ideas of things that I always wanted to do, but just never had the time for them. And COVID afforded that time, so I had started a coffee business. And it originally started as an online model, but the profit margins were so slim to grow and scale the business that I pulled away from the online model and I started roasting my own coffee. And then I ended up getting a partnership deal with the Somerset Patriots, which is a minor league to the New York Yankees. Had my own concession stand there, and um, but then life hit me. Where I was living, the owner of the property, not only where I was living, but I also had a place there to roast the coffee. She had passed away, a very close family friend, but I ended up having to move. So I found myself lost of being able to not only grow my business and continue it because I had no place to roast the coffee, but I also had to put a roof over my head. New Jersey's not a cheap place to live. So and also my full-time job that I had at the time was just being bought out by a Swedish company. So things weren't looking so great on the job front. So I couldn't take that chance and that risk. And I am a risk taker most of the time, but financially it just didn't make sense. I couldn't do it. So I ended up having to close the coffee aspect of the business. But the whole idea was coffee to start your day, clothing to make you look good, a fragrance to make you smell good, and then a wine to celebrate the day. That was the whole circle of life. That was the business plan and the business model. I haven't forgotten about that completely, but I'm kind of restructuring things. I've made Sleepless now the record label for my music brand. I'm repurposing the brand a little bit, but it'll eventually get to being a full lifestyle brand that will now include music and travel and some of those features that I'm working on. But I'm one guy and it takes time. And
Yeah.
so it was music, and I also have my own podcast show called Advancing the Show that's going to be run under that title. Um, and that show was teaching people about the business of music. Most of these kids that start out don't realize that your music is a brand. So I'm actually writing a music program called Your Band is a Brand. And
Mhm.
the whole purpose is you're marketable. What your song is, what your band is your Nike, and you got to learn how to market it and promote it and advertise it and sell it so people would want to buy it, and that's kind of the test that I'm doing with my own music is because I can teach it, but can I do it? And that's one of the things that, as a one man band, it's a lot of work. When you
Yeah.
have a band, you could divvy up the parts to other people, but kind of a control freak. I like to do things a certain way, and um, social media is a big learning lesson. I manage a guitar store a friend of mine owns, and I handle his TikTok account. Account's
Oh,
doing great, loving it. My personal band TikTok is horrible. I'm getting maybe 100 views, and so still trying to figure out why the algorithm will work on one thing and it won't work on another. Those are the struggles that musicians come across every day. So just, trying to understand that as my point and purpose, even when working with my artists. Because, like Janet Gardner, she has a record label. So when the record comes out, the label does all the promoting and the pushing and stuff. So we don't have to do a whole lot on our end. And that's changing. Things are changing constantly. Record labels aren't doing what they used to do and could do. And so the whole model in the business has changed. But Sleepless Life is still very much a big passion of mine, and I'm repurposing it and working with it. But it's a lot. There's another show that I want to develop, and it's not even music related. It's about people and their life. I have friends that have had organ transplants, and I think there's a beautiful story that could be told in that. One friend of mine who got her transplant from a 17-year-old kid that died in a car accident, and she got to meet the family 5 years later. It's a magical story. My best friend died, and she was an organ donor. The day she died, she saved 5 lives. So it was heartbreaking for me to lose my best friend, but a beautiful story that she got to save five more lives. You know what I mean? So there's
Yeah.
stories
Wow.
there that could be told for sure. So yeah, I'm a busy guy. I got a lot of things. I should have been a clown where I could just juggle.
Yeah, you do have a lot of things up in the air. And you did mention about the business of music. I did want to ask you that. How has the business changed even from 5 years ago? It seems like every few years there's something different. But how's the music industry and the music business side of it? The side that we don't hear. We hear the music, but we don't, see the behind the scenes stuff. How's the business really changed?
It's changed a lot, and the industry has lost control of its own thing. Where movies, I feel like, still kind of kept a grasp on things. They were still able to sell DVDs and DVD. Where what's interesting is vinyl has made a comeback in sales and things like so. As in terms of a physical product, that kind of resurged, and there's some physical elements that are still able to make money. But when you look at streaming and record labels like I think it was Universal Music Group that just bought out a publishing company. So now
Mhm.
Universal owns all the rights to all this music and so the labels are finding it harder and harder to make money and are only looking for creators that have these exuberant platforms and they'll try and capitalize on it. But what they're finding is they're throwing so much money at these creators and they'll be like a one hit wonder and then the money's kind of just lost in a sense. And for the artist standpoint to want a record deal doesn't make sense anymore because the label will do everything for them. They'll promote, they'll pay this money, this, but that all has to get paid back. So you're making like no money to begin with.
Mhm.
And then with streaming, even if you do it independently, unless you have a good following, are you making some good coin? There's a New Jersey artist by the name of Will Wood who did a Patreon campaign. He raised $350,000 for his album. You know,
Mhm.
that's proof that as an independent artist, you can certainly do it. It's just putting all your ducks in a row. I had a band
Yeah.
reach out to me not too long ago that somebody wanted to manage them, but they were going to charge them $3,000 a month.
Mhm.
And they had a very small following. And I said to them, I said, I don't mean to be insulting, but at 400 followers, what are they going to market? What are they going to advertise? What are they going to promote? Like you have to have some more substance behind you for them to make you marketable. Unless they're going to
Yeah.
take you and make you an opening act, which is what I did with one of my former bands that I managed was you're not doing local shows. You're going to be opening for touring acts. They have a built-in audience. That's where you're going to sell yourself. You're going to get on stage, you're going to put on a great show, and you're going to win over every audience member over time. And because the drummer was such a great networker, he's now the drummer for a national touring act and things like that. So it may not be your band that essentially makes it, but if you're an artist within that band, you can find success through those trials and errors. And not to knock the small local bands that are trying it, it's just you got to get people to come out to your show. And I see it all the time. Like they're trying to hustle and bustle people will go see, Pink and pay $400 Giant Stadium, and I love Pink. She's a favorite of mine.
Yeah.
But they won't spend $20 to see their best friend on stage and try and help them support them. And there was a lesson that I learned in starting all this is you'll find people that you think will support you don't. And the people you don't even know will become your biggest supporters. So when I started in this business 15 years ago with Lorenzo Ponce, I learned that lesson very, very quickly. I my own family didn't like the success that I was getting in music. They just didn't think it was the direction I should go in. So you can't live your life to pleasing people. When I worked with Lorenzo, my mother turned around and was like, "Why would she hire you?" And I was like, "Why would she not?" I put in the work, I put in the hours, I put in the sweat equity, and I was afforded I took it as a class, as a learning experience to develop this business because I didn't know. I didn't know anything about the music industry, but I had this opportunity to learn and to be good at it. I got a book by Paul Allen called Artist Management, and I learned the business of what it takes. And I'm sending her radio links and this email. I got her front page editorials in the Asbury Press and Airplay. And when you're hungry, you make these things happen. And, it's just having somebody to give you that opportunity to do it. And I always tell people that are starting out, if you want to be a roadie or a manager, offer to help out as much as you can. A friend of mine who I recently became friends with, Sam Wall is his name. I met him at a Janet Gardner show we were doing up in Buffalo or Connecticut or somewhere. I forget where it was, but it was on the East Coast North. And this kid works and he hustles and he's like willing to work with anyone and whoever. And I find that as the younger version of me, like just he's hungry and he wants it. And he'll travel anywhere. If there's music, he'll be there. And
Yeah,
that inspires me even to today, seeing that kind of work ethic. And that's it. You have to be hungry. Lorenza had a show up in Woodstock, New York when I was first working with her. I got out of work at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in New Jersey, drove 3 hours up to Woodstock, New York, set up, we did the show, packed up, got back in the car. I had 30 minutes before I had to be back at work the next day.
wow. When did you
That's what you
sleep?
do. What?
When did you sleep that day? You got 30 minutes to.
It was a very long day at work, lots of coffee, and
Yeah,
when I got out at 3 o'clock, I think I went home and slept for 12 hours. you know, um, but that was it. It was that passion, that hunger, and you have to be thick-skinned to work in this business. You have to be able to handle rejection. And when I released Valentine, I'm not a singer. I'm not a vocalist. I had a little bit of vocal training many, many years ago with a woman by the name of Katie Agresta, who trained tons of famous people. But I didn't stick with it because she was in New York. I'm in New Jersey. It was just too far. Um, so when I released Valentine, the whole day I tortured myself of waiting for somebody to say, like, this sucks. You shouldn't do it. Don't do it. Stop now. And I tortured myself for the whole day waiting to hear that. And nobody said that, you know? And that meant a lot to me because I hate the sound of my voice. Even when I'm listening back to a podcast show, I'm like, oh, it's like nails on a chalkboard. But it's what you hear doesn't always necessarily relate to what everybody else is hearing. So people may be listening to that song and relating to the lyrics. People may be loving the music to it. Some may love the way I sound. A friend of mine, was like, you have a very Rob Zander sound to from Cheap Trick sound to your voice. A lot of people told me it reminded them of a Tom Petty song. That's all cool when you get that kind of feedback. Makes me happy.
absolutely. Now, those are great lessons, just overall. And I mean, you're right. You gotta have the courage and the confidence to put the music out, and
Yeah.
not knowing
Well,
what the reaction will be.
and you mentioned confidence, and I'm still struggling with the identity crisis of being an artist. So I logged on to my Spotify the other day and it says verified artist and there's a picture of me and that hit me upside the head in a very different way. And I'm like, but I'm not that, at least I don't see myself as that. I've been the guy that's been working in the business for 15 years and has toured and worked with all these phenomenal people that to be the guy writing and performing and singing, it's a bit of an identity crisis for me because I don't know who that guy is. I'm still figuring that out. So
It's
it's just, like, what do I look like? Am I ever going to do shows? These are the questions that I'm asking myself. If I decide to go and perform, I have a set list written already. I know what songs I would do. I just don't know. It's still very early in the game for me. I'm still getting my feet wet at this, and it's exciting though, and learning with the rest of them.
yeah, that's it makes for an exciting journey and an interesting journey. I want you mentioned a little bit about tours and everything. I think our audience, for those who have never will be on a tour or be backstage or have an opportunity to do things like that, what 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 is that experience like? What is that experience of being a tour manager, being on tour?
It's the best feeling ever. I can tell you that. I remember like my first gig with Lorenzo. Well, it wasn't my first gig, but we were opening up for Bon Jovi. And she's just like, when you get to the arena, go to Will Call, pick up your pass, and just meet me backstage. I had never done anything like that before. So I'm just trying to play it cool. I'm walking into Penn State Arena, down the steps, and walking past the stage. And I cheated and made it right. And I walked and to see where the band walks up and all their stuff, and then I'm like, all right, before I get in trouble, I'm getting out of here. And then I walked, not ever being backstage in an arena, I didn't know where she was, so I made a left. And I'm walking down the hall, and I see the sign that says JBJ, and I'm like, I don't think I'm supposed to be here. And I turn around and I went the other way. Catering room had food, anything that you can think of was just like. So then I met up with them and we did the meet and greet. I handled the meet and greet and everything like that. So that was my first taste into rock stardom, like the big leagues, the
Yeah.
big deal. We had done a lot of local shows and some shows in New York and New Jersey, and um I had DJ'd a lot prior to that, so that was my first taste of like music and creating my version of a set list and entertaining a crowd. But then she was the first band that I actually ever worked with, like on a professional level, like them setting up and sound check. And I'll never forget, the place isn't there anymore, but it was called the Living Room in New York City. And she was
Okay.
doing a residency there. And so the first night I get there, like they're sound checking. I'm like, this is cool. And she's got top notch. Sean Pelton from Saturday Night Live house band is playing drums for her. Jeff Kazee from Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes isn't. So I'm having a pinch me moment of all these great talented people and not being. I'm never one that's like fascinated by people per se. Like everybody's everybody. I don't know if I've ever really been starstruck in a way, but it was the pinch me moment of like, this is where I want to be. This is what I want to be doing. How do I do it? And I just continued to work through the process that everything just happened naturally along the way. In 2015, I got asked to manage an actual tour, a nationwide tour across the US into Canada. And that was my first taste of being on the road, being away for 2 months and living life on the road. And what's cool is you're surrounded by people 24/7. So you never have a lonely moment. And there's always something going on. And um, I didn't have any mentors that really taught me how to be a tour manager. It was something I kind of just had to learn on my own and learn. And when I started in 2010 in the music business, YouTube wasn't is what it is today for the editorial videos and things like that. So taking books, I actually took a class with Berklee College of Music. It was called Concert Touring and Promotion. And that's where I learned a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. My professor was a tour accountant who's worked with like Madonna and all these crazy people. And he had said to me, because I was very loyal to like working with Lorenzo when I was in class, and he was, you need to break out of that shell and start working with other people. You need to become more well rounded. And I was just so like, no, like this is where I'm going to stay. This is what I'm going to do. I want to stay, you know. So once after 3 years and her final solo show, I think we were just all tired. I know she was definitely tired from doing a lot because first class session player and touring and all this stuff. So it was just a lot more work for her. Um, so I started looking for a local talent to work with and manage. And I started learning the skills in that way of starting at the bottom to working my way back up. And because I started up at the top, so this is where you want to be. You want to get back up there. And so on my first tour, I had to learn to advance shows, and I still have the binder from my first tour of all the advances, the day sheets, and everything like that. So I really just learned on a whim and learned from that tour of what to do, what not to do, and it was trial and error. But I worked with some great bands that are, Palais Royale was on that tour, and they're a number one hard rock band. They're with Sumerian Records. They're touring all over the world. That was their first tour. Um, and it's funny, a few tours later, I worked with a lot of YouTubers. So Johnny Gilbert, who's a well-known YouTuber, was on one of the tours, and he's now touring with Palais Royale. So I find it kind of funny that these people that I worked with are now working together, which is cool and exciting. Um, and then in 2018, I got picked up to work with the amazing Kreskin, who unfortunately passed away in December. Um, I was his road manager, but he was in his 80s and didn't have the heavy touring schedule that everybody else, typically does. So I got to be home and travel. We got booked for a festival. I'd get to the house, the limo would pick us up. We would fly to Toronto. We did the show and flew back home. So that was the experience of working again at a higher level. He used to be an A-list celebrity back in the 70s and 80s, the most appeared guest on Johnny Carson. So once again, life came full circle for working with that higher level of talent, but at a different scale. This, I got to stay home and live life a little bit and not have to say goodbye. Because the biggest lesson that everybody will learn when they go on tour is fitting back into life. The hardest thing ever. When I left for that first tour and came back home 2.5 months later, everybody else's life continues. And I'm like, hello, it's me. I'm back. You know,
Yeah.
because you're gone. You're out of sight. You're out of mind. So people don't think, you know, oh, let's call Ryan for dinner. Relationships don't work. Came back. That was a lost cause. That was some inspired songs at one point. So it's a life lesson, and you have to be thick-skinned. Shawn Mendes canceled a tour because he was home for so long and then going back out on the road. I just don't think the guy could muster up getting back into that hustle and grind. Like when you're in it, you're in a groove and you keep going. But when you stop, if it's not in your blood to be on the road, it's very, very hard. I think people like the Rolling Stones, it's all they know. And that's why Mick Jagger's 81 years old running back and forth on a stage, which I don't even run now, but it's in his DNA to just be on the road, be entertaining. And my former client Kreskin was that same way. He passed away at the age of 89. And in this time last year, he was still doing shows. We were doing Zoom shows and things like that. It just becomes your DNA. It just becomes all you want to do is entertain. And for me, it's being creative. That's all I ever wanted to do is, if it's building a website, I built all my websites on my own. It's just having that creative outlet, whether it's writing a song, creating something, or something on social media. I think it's just within, and you'll know if you can live with it or without it. And I think that's the true test. If you can't live without it, then you're going to find success some way, somehow. And I've tried to walk away from this business so many times. Keeps pulling me back, keeps pulling me back. Yeah, it's I think where I'm supposed to be. It
Yeah.
really is because everything that I do in this business just comes naturally to me. And some of it's trial and error, and some of it's from knowing what to do and how to handle those situations and being able to work with people. If you want to be a manager in this business, you have to have thick skin and you have to be able to work with multiple personalities. Some of the biggest celebrity people that I've met are the sweetest and kindest, and some of the people that are getting started need the reality check. So you got to be able to balance that, and handle those personalities because it's a struggle 100% at times because people like things a certain way. Like Kreskin was two people. He was a guy that when he was the amazing Kreskin, it's all business. He wanted things a certain way and you have to be able to handle what he wants. But when he was George Kresge, the person, sweetest man on the planet, he would give you the shirt off your back and say, "Here you go. I don't need anything. Go." And that's just who he was. Sometimes you
Nice.
find that in music and sometimes you don't.
Yeah. Wow. Tremendous, tremendous insight. Tremendous
Mhm.
insight, Ryan. And where can people find you on social media? Where are your social channels for your music, for your business?
I'm everywhere.
Where can people find
So RyanGalway.com is my main website, has everything soup to nuts on there. RyanandTheRemedy.com is my music website where you can stream the songs and find out what's going on with me musically. Um, Ryan Galway on Instagram, Twitter, or X. Um,
you?
And then my personal Facebook is Rye Galway. It's facebook.com/Rye Galway. Somebody had Ryan Galway. I mean, come on, who steals my name? And then yeah, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok for as long as it lasts. It's Ryan and the Remedy on TikTok. Um we'll see what happens with that if I can get the algorithm to even work. But yeah, so you can, if you Google Ryan Galway, you'll find something of me somewhere for sure.
Awesome. So everybody knows where to find your work, your music, your inspiration, your business. A lot of
Yeah.
great things going on, Ryan. Thank you so much for sharing your insight, your stories, your advice, your the ups and downs of the business and everything, Ryan. Just tremendous insight on that, and thanks for joining Adeptus on Air.
Thank you. This has been awesome. I really appreciate you having me, and I wish you the best of luck as well. Hopefully, we can do this again sometime.
Absolutely, absolutely, Ryan. Very much appreciated.
Thanks for listening to Adeptus On Air. If you like this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. The views and opinions by the podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Adeptus. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice.